In this session, we want to start looking at UML, the Unified Modeling Language, and hopefully get to at least class diagrams. So I'm going to go to my browser, and if I go to uml.org, this is the official site for UML. We can see here that UML specifications, here's the current specification, and we can download it here. And if you know me, you know I love documentation, especially official technical documentation. But I'm going to hold off on this one for a little bit because it is a complex document. I'll just say that one of the neat, interesting things about UML is it describes a very general model that even can be used to describe itself. Bit of inception there, but again, we'll save that for another day, another session. It might be a little easier to come over here to Wikipedia and say, okay, here's UML, Unified Modeling Language, and what we find is it's a visual tool. Okay, so UML specifies how we can draw various shapes and what they should mean, so that if we all have the same understanding, we can communicate with each other, and we can do it visually, graphically. Which sometimes is just a lot easier. As they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and we can share ideas. We can do everything from brainstorming at a very high general level to analyzing the details of the smallest parts of a system. Okay, so with that said, we'll see that we're on the second major version of UML. So there's UML 1, UML 2. One of the things that UML 2 did is it added more different types of diagrams available. But again, there's really only a couple we need to start with. We find that UML diagrams fit into one of two categories. There are structural diagrams and behavioral diagrams. So if we're thinking about a system and we're thinking about, hey, what are the parts of the system and how are they organized, then that would be the structure of the system. Whereas if we think about, hey, here's the parts of the system, but here's how they interact with each other. This part does this part does that, kind of thing. And so then we would be looking at the behavioral. So we find that when we're talking about the structure of systems, class diagrams are the most common, probably type of structural diagram that we find. That's what we're going to start with. And for behavioral diagrams, activity diagrams are probably the more general, most widely used behavioral diagrams. But again, we have others for more specific cases. So let's take a look at a class diagram here and see what Wikipedia is going to tell us. Yes, here's the basic structure of a class diagram. It's 3 boxes lined up vertically. In the top box is the name of the class. In the middle box are the properties or the attributes or the features of items that fit within this class. And in the bottom box are methods or actions, behaviors that items that fit within this class, this classification or category, can do. Okay. So even here within the class diagram, we see there's this idea of these properties or features that are sort of structural, and the methods, which are the behaviors of it. Okay. And I should probably point out the fact that I kind of said it, but we create class diagrams when we're thinking, hey, there are a bunch of things. What are the things out there in this system? Okay. And when we start categorizing things, grouping things, or classifying things, we'll say, okay, here's a bunch of parts of the system, and they have a lot of features in common. So we'll come up with a class for those things. And we'll list out the features they have in common here as the properties in the middle box. Okay. And they have certain behaviors in common as well. And those would become the methods of these objects. So, in fact, let's see here. They're showing bank account. Okay, so they're saying, okay, in a banking situation, a bank has lots of accounts for all kinds of different customers. Okay, or maybe we're thinking of, hey, as a customer, as a person, I have multiple bank accounts. Okay, and so even if I have multiple bank accounts in different banks, what do they all have in common? Or from the bank's perspective, if the bank has a bunch of accounts for various customers, what do they have in common? And we can see here that what they've chosen, in this design, as simple as it is that the bank is considering that all accounts have an owner, okay? And that there is some string of characters for the name. So each bank account has an owner, and they can have different names. And then each bank account has a balance. Okay, how much money is currently in the account? How much would the bank have to, give you if you demanded all your money? And we can see that that is some number of dollars, which initializes to 0. A lot of details here we'll see again and again later. But then we think about, okay, what are the primary actions? What are the big things that a bank account can do or can be done to a bank account? And, if you have a bank account, you can deposit money into it or you can withdraw money from it. Again, from the bank's perspective, an owner can deposit money into their account, which affects their balance. Or an owner can withdraw money from their account, which again affects their balance. So that's another key thing is these methods or behaviors or activities within a class generally operate on the properties of that class. So when saying, okay, what can a bank account object, an actual instance of a bank account do? It can deposit or it can withdraw, and that's going to affect its balance. And it's dependent upon being the owner. Okay, so all of this is kind of like buying an art book. And you read the book and it tells you all about color theory and different types of media and perspective, but it doesn't actually give you the tools to draw with or to sculpt with or whatever type of art you want to produce. So we've got a specification, that's great. We need some tool to draw with, and so I'm going to come up here to diagrams.net. One of the interesting things about diagrams.net is there's no sign up here. There's no create an account or anything like that because with diagrams.net, we're using the software, but we don't store our files on diagrams.net servers. We will then link diagrams.net to other storage sites. So we'll see that in a minute. You can use it in your browser. I can just click start and I use it in my browser. You can also download it locally to your machine as your drawings get more complex. It's probably beneficial to download it and use it there directly. But again, for simpler drawings or when you're starting out or when you want to share things with other people on the fly kind of thing, it's nice to just be able to do it within your browser. So I'm going to click on start. And if it has, you're going to come up with probably this box if you haven't used diagrams.net before and it hasn't put a cookie on your machine. Okay, and this is basically saying, okay, where do you want to store it to? And notice device is my hard drive, my local storage devices, but there's OneDrive, which is Microsoft's cloud storage, Google Drive, Dropbox, and even GitHub out there. So I'm just going to say I want to store this locally for now. And I can either open an existing diagram if I had one, but I'm going to say, okay, create a new diagram. When I get here, we see that the suggested file name for this is untitled diagram.draw.io. Just for reference, draw.io is what the software used to be called, and now it's diagrams.net. So the draw.io is kind of a category. You'll still see that from time to time. That's just the former name. And I'm going to call this something like demo, okay, for my first. All right. There are a bunch of templates, and there are categories of templates over here. In fact, you'll notice down here is UML. But I'm just going to start with a blank diagram and say create. Now it says, okay, what do you want to call it? Since I told it I wanted to store it locally on my hard drive, I'm going to save it on my desktop, and I'm going to call it demo. Okay, and so yeah, I can give the desktop version, blah, blah. So what we see is there are shapes over here on the left-hand side, and we can search for various shapes. If I get my face out of the way, there's some different categories, and here's even UML down here. If I expand that, I see some of the different shapes in UML, and we'll see, oh, there's a class diagram and some others. If you click on more shapes, this will bring us back up to those other libraries of shapes that are available. And if we scroll down here, we'll see that there's UML, which was selected by default. And there's also UML 2.5. So I can select that as well and see that, okay, here are my UML shapes. And now if I expand UML 2.5, yeah, loads them in, and there are even more shapes. And so, as I said, UML2 added more diagrams and things to it. All that to say that we could simply use 3 boxes over here and say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to do it myself manually. Okay? And so now I have a box for the class name. I have a box here where I can put the properties. And I have a box here where I can put the methods. Great. And let's see. I could even select all of those and come over here to features and say arrange. And my face is going to be in the way no matter what. Where I can come over here and I can say group these together. And so now I can treat them as one, and then I could ungroup it and so on. Or I could just come over here into the library and say, you know what? Let me get a shape where somebody's already done that for me. Okay. And so now I can put my class name, fill in my class name, my fields. Initially, just don't worry about the details of it. You'll notice here, if you pick up the class diagram from UML 1, or we come over here to the UML2 shapes, there's a lot of other stuff going on in here. There's the geometrics, the angled brackets, if you will, curly braces. There's plus signs here, and colons. Don't worry about that for now. We'll bring them up as we need to.